The five-star Regency Hall glimmered beneath chandeliers shaped like cascading waterfalls of crystal. Mocking laughter rippled along the grand banquet table. A young woman in a pale green evening dress bowed her head, her hands trembling in her lap. Across from her, a man in a faded button-up shirt, its sleeves rolled to reveal hands hardened from years of manual labor, quietly set a glass of water down on the polished oak surface. His voice was low but unwavering. "She's with me." The table fell silent. At the head sat Evelyn Ross, 28, her dark hair curled to perfection, her gray eyes sharp as glass. The silver locket resting on her collarbone quivered with her uneven breath. In that instant, the entire room froze. Just 12 hours earlier, Daniel Cross was standing in the cramped kitchen of his small suburban apartment, flipping pancakes for his 8-year-old daughter Lila. At 36, his broad frame carried the weight of long days repairing furnaces and air ducts for families across the city. The sun crept through the blinds, painting golden stripes across chipped countertops and hand-me-down cabinets. "Daddy, look," Lila chirped, holding up her newest crayon drawing. A bright rainbow stretched above 3 stick figures holding hands. "That's us." "You know me?" And she hesitated, pointing at the third figure. "Someone who makes you smile." Daniel chuckled, brushing his daughter's hair back. "Always the dreamer. Daddy's never alone," Lila replied with childish certainty. "I'm always with you." In his pocket, Daniel carried a battered leather notebook. On the first page, written in faded ink, were the words, "To Daniel Cross, the man I owe my life to. Protect him." Signed, Jonathan Ross. Across town, Evelyn Ross, the youngest CEO in the city's history and heir to Ross International, sat in her sleek 41st floor office. Her eyes, cold and efficient, skimmed contracts worth billions. "Tonight's banquet will finalize the partnership," her assistant reminded her. "The Royal Regency restaurant has everything prepared." Evelyn's fingers brushed the silver locket around her neck, her most treasured possession, though the reason why had blurred with time. That afternoon, Daniel received an urgent call. The cooling system at the Regency had failed, hours before its most important event of the year. "Come on, Lila," he said, grabbing his tool bag. "Time to save somebody's fancy dinner party." The Regency buzzed with last-minute preparations. Servers polished silver until it gleamed, and wine glasses sparkled beneath chandelier light. Daniel crouched by a vent, his tools spread across the floor, while Lila quietly colored nearby. As they crossed the dining area, a group of early-arrived patrons lifted their glasses. One man in a tailored navy suit sneered loudly. "Excuse me," he called, "but I think you're lost. There's a diner 2 blocks down that might suit you better." Laughter erupted around the table. Daniel tightened his jaw but kept walking, taking Lila's hand. "They're wrong, Daddy," she whispered, her small voice cutting through the room. "It's all right, sweetheart," he murmured. Moments later, a young woman carrying a tray stumbled as a server bumped into her, wine spilling across her borrowed dress. "Oh, how fitting," one woman at the table snickered. "Someone like that doesn't belong here anyway." Crimson with humiliation, the young woman froze as laughter rang out. Daniel stopped. His dark eyes hardened, and for a heartbeat, the air itself seemed to grow colder. He said nothing and moved on. "Why are they mean?" Lila asked softly. "Because they've forgotten what matters," Daniel replied, touching the notebook in his pocket. 8 hours later, the same dining hall glittered with opulence. Chandeliers blazed, and the city's elite filled the long table adorned with fine china and polished silver. Evelyn Ross entered in a sweeping midnight gown, commanding the room's attention. Her locket gleamed at her throat as she took her place at the head of the table. Beside her sat her assistant, the same young woman humiliated earlier, her dress still faintly stained, her hands trembling. "Tonight," Evelyn announced, her voice slicing through the chatter, "we celebrate a new era of business." Applause rose. Glasses clinked. The illusion of perfection held, until Charles Harrington, a pompous investor from London, leaned forward. "I do hope we're not lowering standards," he jeered, eyeing the assistant. "What is she wearing? A clearance rack special?" Cruel laughter erupted again. Phones angled discreetly toward her, ready to capture the shame. Tears welled in the young woman's eyes as she whispered, "I should go." And that's when the air shifted. Daniel Cross appeared at her side, boots silent on marble, carrying only a glass of water. Without hesitation, he placed it in front of her. "She's with me," he said. The room fell into stunned silence. Charles Harrington shot to his feet, his voice booming. Outrageous. Who do you think you are? This is a private affair. Daniel's gaze met his, steady, unflinching. I'm someone who stands where I'm needed. Evelyn Ross, seated at the head, froze. Her gray eyes widened, and her fingers tightened around her locket. There was something in his tone, something hauntingly familiar. You can't just walk in here, barked Vivian Zhang, a steel magnate from Singapore. Yet her voice wavered under Daniel's calm stare. I am serious, Daniel replied softly. The assistant looked up at him in awe, tears streaming down her cheeks. Charles's face turned purple with indignation. Who gives you the right to interrupt us? Daniel smiled faintly. Someone who keeps his promises. Evelyn's breath caught. That voice. That presence. It pulled fragments of memory she had long buried. Call the police, Charles demanded. You might want to ask your host first, Daniel said calmly, his eyes never leaving Evelyn. All attention shifted to her. Evelyn's knuckles whitened as she gripped her locket, her mind racing back to a night of twisted metal and rushing water, and a voice saying, "You're safe now." What's your name? She asked, her voice trembling. Daniel Cross. The name hit her like lightning. She collapsed back into her chair, pale as parchment. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the battered notebook, opening to the first page. He lifted it for her to see. Her father's handwriting. To Daniel Cross, the man I owe my life to. Evelyn's chest constricted. Memories of the car accident 15 years earlier flooded back. The stranger who had saved her and her father then disappeared. Oh my God, she whispered. Gasps filled the room as whispers spread like wildfire. Evelyn unclasped her locket, revealing a tiny photo of her younger self and her father, both battered but alive. This man, she said with newfound strength, pointing to Daniel, saved our lives. Phones clicked and flashed, but this time to capture a miracle. Charles Harrington sputtered. This is absurd. A trick. Evelyn stood, pulling a letter from her portfolio. My father left me this before he passed. He wrote, "The man who saves your life without reason, he is family forever." Her voice rang across the hall. Daniel Cross doesn't need to prove himself. He has my trust, my respect, and my gratitude. Applause thundered through the hall. Executives rose to their feet, ashamed of their earlier mockery. From the kitchen entrance, little Lila appeared, clutching her crayon drawing. She skipped to her father and held it up proudly. Daddy, I drew you with the pretty lady who wears the necklace. The room fell into stunned silence. In the child's picture, Daniel, Lila, and a woman with Evelyn's locket stood together under a rainbow. Evelyn's composure cracked. Tears blurred her vision as she studied the drawing, the innocent hope of a child reflecting a truth she had long forgotten. Daniel rested a hand on Lila's shoulder. Ready to go home, sweetheart? Yes, Daddy. They turned to leave. But before they reached the door, Lila skipped back and set the drawing in front of Evelyn. You looked sad, she whispered. But in my picture, you're happy. Evelyn clutched the simple crayon art to her chest, the weight of contracts and chandeliers fading into nothing. For the first time in years, she believed again, in connection, in gratitude, in the things that truly mattered. And as Daniel and Lila disappeared through the doors, Evelyn sat trembling, holding onto the picture as if it were the most valuable gift she'd ever been given.